tell us. Today, my name is Darka Garnik. I'm going to be a moderator of this panel. In real life, I'm the director of Energy Security Marshall Plan for Ukraine. So I'm dealing this issue a lot in my will and also against my will. So fortunately, we're going to have a good panel today. We are joined by esteemed members in here with different kind of expertise. I just wanted to kind of bring up the moment that happened to us 2 days ago. We had a dinner between the UK delegation, US delegation, and Ukraine delegation. And what you quickly could notice that all of the Ukrainians out there were literally glued to their phone. And the reason for that is that because November is a very, very, very difficult month for us, historically since 2014, because that's when the protests have started, but also now because November, October is when Russia is very active on targeting the energy security of Ukraine, targeting energy facilities, targeting the civilian infrastructure, and literally, being honest, everything that moves and is alive. So with that in mind, I want to bring in some numbers. And the numbers right now are really hard to calculate about the energy security because everything is getting destroyed and resurrected again constantly. But we believe that anywhere between 70% of the operational capacity of Ukraine have been destroyed as of now. At the same time, about 0.4% of Ukraine's solar potential and 0.4% of Ukraine wind potential is possible to power Ukraine's whole country. So with that in mind, I would like to play a video. Thank you so much for putting it. So last year, Energy Security Marshall Plan has been the topic of the pavilion. Zhenya, who is here on the panel, has brought a huge solar panel that was destroyed by the Russian drones. And we were able to showcase this case at our Ukraine pavilion. So this is a video that made one of our team members, Jamie, who is currently in the UK, but we would be really happy to see it.
War is a cruel teacher. It has taught us to install 1.5 gigawatts of distributed solar and build 19 wind turbines in a combat zone to protect our children, communities, and environment. But this is bigger than Ukraine. Removing our dependence on fossil fuels is the strongest action we can take to increase international security, to protect Ukraine, Europe, and the planet. Only 0.46% of Ukraine's solar and 0.4% of its wind potential is needed to meet the entire country's electricity needs. Ukraine had the potential to power Europe 6 times over. Since the beginning of the war, Russia earned at least 752 billion in revenue from fossil fuel exports. We are paying for the bullets and bombs that are killing heroes and civilians fighting for our security and freedom. It is the imperative we change this sad and dangerous dependence. Ukrainians are brave and resistant, but we can't do this alone. Ukraine is leading the way. With your help, we will create a distributed power production system resilient to attacks, a Ukrainian energy security Marshall Plan. Secure, resilient, prosperous. Protect Ukraine. Protect the planet.
Thank you so much. Feel free to join. By the way, for those who are joining us online, we just got our water. So I'm very happy about this. Right now, we're going to transfer to a fantastic friend of Ukraine and personal friend of mine who has probably survived most interesting moments of my life traveling to the front line. Alex Kornelll, who is also known as UK Trade Envoy to Ukraine. Alex, if you could please, have several remarks about your experience with energy security and about your work in general.
Thank you, Darka. So as I said, I'm the UK Trade Envoy to Ukraine. Also, I chair the Ukraine group in the United Kingdom Parliament, and my own family history is tied to Ukraine as my grandparents are from Lviv. I just want to start by saying the United Kingdom's support for Ukraine is unbreakable and enduring, and we have cross-party consensus in the UK. We are lucky that we have in our parliament cross-party consensus, because not every country who has that, even in the coalition of the willing, has that cross-party consensus. And the United Kingdom has signed and ratified a 100-year agreement with Ukraine, the first one globally. We hope other nations will sign similar agreements, because the support for Ukraine isn't just about the full-scale invasion and Russian aggression. It is about the long-term economic and democratic direction of the country of Ukraine. And it's important that we and our partners make that support permanent. So one of the pillars, 9 pillars of the agreement between the United Kingdom and Ukraine, 99-year now agreement, is energy. So we have an energy pillar in the agreement. So energy, we've recognized the need for energy, not just now, but for the long term. And I want to just say the Ukrainian government's commitment to decarbonization, for meeting its national determined contributions, for decarbonizing the country is incredible, considering the nature of the war. And on top of that, there is a real recognition, not just in the government, expecting the government, right across the people of Ukraine that I've met, that energy security is national security, and renewables will provide security for Ukrainians, because you have a large-scale coal-fired power station or large-scale nuclear power station, it is relatively easy to take out. If you have a solar 100-megawatt solar distributed solar farm where you space the solar panels out and you put the substation underground, same with wind. If you have a 100-megawatt wind farm, which is a very big wind farm, a lot of land, particularly with the spacing they need in Ukraine, and I've seen one of these in Mykolaiv region, and you put the substation underground, that is far more secure than anything that a traditional fossil fuel or even nuclear could provide. So the direction of travel of Ukraine is one that actually we should all be supporting. So I'm going to just talk about a couple of things the United Kingdom's doing before concluding my remarks. So first of all, we are signing joint ventures with Ukraine to provide that pathway, that renewable pathway. I myself put a motion down in Parliament on the Energy Security Marshall Plan. Pretty much Jamie, who works in United Kingdom Parliament, basically copied it for the video. So I'm not gonna read it out because you heard it all in the video. However, that is now being transposed through the 100-year agreement, through joint ventures, into actual real activity. And that's great, because a lot of the times we do things in Parliament, we write motions, we have debates, and then nothing happens. But now we're seeing this real. So the first large-scale energy deal between the United Kingdom and Ukraine is between Octopus and DTEC, and it's $100 million or euro, more or less, deal on solar and battery storage. That is not yet fully funded, but Octopus is starting that work. That $100 million facility will be enough to power a large-scale city like Lviv. So there's real big potential for joint ventures between companies from Western Europe, United States, Canada, Australia, etc., and Ukraine to provide that. And then if you think about it in the long term, the sort of economic growth that we would expect for Ukraine post-ceasefire, those investments will have a great ROI. They look risky now, but post-ceasefire, these will be the best investments anywhere in the world, because they will just shoot. I'm just talking about another country now briefly in Ukraine, Denmark. So Denmark and the Danish government work very closely with the region, the Oblast of Mykolaiv, and they've worked closely on a wind farm, which I've been to, which the majority of that wind farm was constructed during the war, and that has been constructed using wind turbines provided by Vestas, which is a Danish company. The Danes, I have to say, are the world leaders in the production of wind turbines, although some of the fabrication is in the United Kingdom, I'm pleased to say. But again, this is exactly post-ceasefire, exactly the sort of partnerships that can be done. It's not just about installation of wind or solar or hydro or hydrogen. It'll actually become about production, because we can look forward. If you look at somewhere like Dnipro, the steel fabrication there is world-leading, world-class. I've been to Interpipe, which has got an electric arc furnace of a type we do not have in the United Kingdom. They do in other European countries, not in the United Kingdom. It's a world-leading facility. Those sort of facilities can be used for fabrication of wind turbines. So and some components around battery storage. So there is a real potential for production in Ukraine. I'm just going to conclude by saying the United Kingdom government also has a program called Innovate Ukraine. We've just had the second round, £33 million invested in R&D and pilot projects. And these projects are a whole range of projects. So it's about grid security, it's about battery storage, it's about smart grids, it's about generation and innovation. I'm not going to talk about all 33 projects, but one project that comes to mind is a project where they developed a large-scale battery storage using scrap iron. And the one thing they've got a lot of in Ukraine is scrap iron. So this is a real opportunity for the UK and Ukraine to work together, because all of these projects are joint venture in UK and Ukrainian companies to develop world-leading technology, actually with less reliance on critical minerals. Not that I've got anything against critical minerals, but we know that some of the places, they're difficult to get to in some places, and some of the difficulties with them, while iron is plentiful, can create solutions which somewhere like here at COP, we can then distribute to other places where it might be difficult, in sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, here in South America, and UK and Ukraine can be the world leaders in that and distribute that technology right throughout the world.
Thank you, Alex. I very much agree that Ukraine can become the model for a lot of reconstruction in the world and a lot of different processes. So that's why we see it as a laboratory for many of those innovations. And before, I know, Alex, you have to leave, but I have just very small little question to you on your partnership between Leeds and Kharkiv, because this is something you're very proud of. And one part of our topic today is this of national diplomacy. So if you can give just like 1 minute on that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll talk about that not in the context of energy, really. So I'm a representative of the City of Leeds. I was on the City Council, and I was lead actually for climate on the City Council before I became Member of Parliament for Leeds. And we have signed a city agreement with the city of Kharkiv. I've just literally 2 weeks ago set up a charity to support twinning activities. And our first activity is to bring a youth football team from Kharkiv to Leeds to train with Leeds United. Leeds United legends will be running training sessions for those young people from Kharkiv. So that's the sort of project that we're doing. But actually, in the context of reconstruction, Leeds has now Europe's largest infrastructure and construction event, UK Reef, which happens every May on the dock in Leeds. It is not as hot as this, so everybody's welcome to come. You won't be as hot as here. And we had 40 Ukrainian mayors come to Leeds this May and had lots of really interesting and productive discussions with every single UK and European company involved in civil engineering, in infrastructure, in architecture. A lot of energy companies were there, hotels, housing development. So there's a real opportunity for reconstruction Ukraine through that vehicle in our city, not just for Kharkiv, but the whole of Ukraine. But we have a particular strong link with Kharkiv, and we're working to support them on their master plan, which is designed by British architect Sir Norman Foster.
Thank you so much, Alex. We are really hoping that you're going to bring the glory to Kharkiv. It's already very glorious, but we really wanted to recover. So right now, we actually super humbled and super honored to be joined by Shon Kastens, the US Congressman. Could you please put him on the... Shon, if you can hear us, we are putting right now you on the screen.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm sorry we're not there in person, but for those following U.S. politics, you appreciate that we had some schedule snafus in the House this week and couldn't come down to Berlin.
We are very happy to see you in here, though. And since you started on this topic, we would like to know, if you were here today, what would be the messages you would try to give to COP30 community, what would be the things you wanted to be part of in here?
So, you know, we were scheduled to come down. I think we had 4 of us who were scheduled to come. That would have been the entirety of the United States federal delegation. I've been to 4 COPs before, including in Madrid after Donald Trump had pulled out of Paris the first time. But even in Madrid, we still had people from the State Department in an observing role. I'm delighted there are so many subnational Americans coming and reminding people that we are as a country more committed than our president is. But it is shameful that the United States doesn't have a federal presence that's there. I'm really excited about this particular presentation and grateful for what you all do. I want to, number one, just stress for my Ukrainian friends in the room. You have overwhelming bipartisan support in Congress, and you have overwhelming bipartisan understanding that when the President of the United States threatened to withhold military aid to Ukraine in exchange for Ukraine interfering in a U.S. election, the President of Ukraine prioritized the democracy of the United States over the very real threats that Ukraine faced. And it's not just our love for Ukraine that brings us here; it's that we owe you all, and we're grateful for what you have did to defend our democracy, even when our president wasn't. The horrors and the evil that Russia has done to Ukraine, I don't want to in any way trivialize those, but I also take such inspiration for what Ukraine is doing with the rare opportunity to have a blank slate. And I love what you're doing on the decentralization, and I want to just give you some sense of what a big deal this could be. One of the statistics that I like to use to track what how the United States compares with the rest of the world is our energy productivity. How much GDP do we generate per unit of energy consumption? We measure our labor productivity, we measure return on capital. We don't often measure our energy productivity. The United States generates about $200 of GDP for every MMBTU of primary energy. The UK, our former speaker will appreciate this, generates about 350. That is a lot more economic activity per unit of energy. The United States should be embarrassed by that. Now, before you get all cocky, UK, the Danes, Denmark, generates over $500. And as you start peeling back the envelope and saying, what is it that these countries are doing that allows them to generate so much more wealth with so much less energy use? A big part in Denmark is what they did after the first OPEC price shock, that they took a very intentional effort to do what Ukraine is now doing and saying, let's decentralize our energy system. Let's not just shift the types of technologies we use, but shift them closer to end users. They weren't doing it for national security reasons. They were doing it for economic reasons. And as you wander, you saw this explosion of small power plants in Denmark that were close enough to the loads that they could also be used in cogeneration modes and double their energy efficiency. When you go to Denmark now, a lot of those plants that were initially built to be coal plants have been retrofitted to be biomass or heat pumps. And the result of that is that the average Dane has a standard of living that is twice as high as the United States would be, adjusted for energy use. What you all are doing is following in that tradition. And there's an enormous opportunity, not just for Ukraine to emerge from this with a stronger, more resilient, cheaper energy system, but I think to lead the rest of the world, where we can copy your example. I think the challenge you're going to find, and the challenge that we have, certainly within the United States, that's made us such laggards, is doing what you are doing right now, doing what the Danes have done, creates a massive wealth transfer from energy producers to energy consumers. Energy producers tend to be very politically organized and fairly monolithic. Energy consumers are often not very well organized and not particularly, and much more heterogeneous in their agendas. And that creates a political challenge, but also an enormous opportunity. And look forward to working with you, learning from you, and being a part of your success.
We are as well. Thank you so much for your remarks. We actually, since we started to talk but bipartisan support. We know that you're part of the Ukraine caucus, and I'm wondering if there is any energy security agenda in place in the caucus at the moment. I know there is some Repo Act, there is you are also discussing the energy security investments into Ukraine. But I'm wondering if there is any kind of vision of the prolonging the energy security Marshall Plan, U.S. involvement in Ukraine.
Yes, and let me parse it to where there's strong bipartisan consensus and where I think we have some challenges that we need to push on a little bit. There is a strong bipartisan recognition that Russia is the problem, that Russia's ability to finance the war is tied to Russia's ability to export oil. And so certainly, I'm not going to say every member of Congress, but certainly within within the bipartisan majority in the Ukrainian caucus, there's a recognition that we need to not only block Russian exports, but box them out of the financial system, make sure that we enforce robust, anti-money laundering rules, coordination, engaging with global insurance companies and international shipping. You understand all those issues, and there's strong bipartisan support for that. I think the areas where we have some vulnerabilities in the bipartisan side that we need to stay vigilant on is, I guess, number one, tied to COP. I think there's an open question: what's the future of multilateralism? Because to do effective international, financial controls and financial regulation, you need partners who will work closely with you. You need partners who trust that if they give highly classified intelligence to the United States, it won't leak out on a signal chat from our Secretary of Defense. I mean, there are real concerns there of the future of multilateral coordination. I think there are concerns, particularly when the Trump family has so much of their wealth tied into cryptocurrencies. So much of the ways that Russia is laundering money and evading sanctions is through cryptocurrency networks. And if we don't have a bipartisan consensus to oppose things that might hurt the Trump family, that also means that it's harder to go after those pieces. And then the last thing, which I don't think we've really ever had a bipartisan consensus on, which doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it, is the single best way to reduce Ukraine's exposure to Russian gas is to reduce the dependency of the Ukrainian economy on fossil fuels. If you look at, and this isn't a political issue, but if you look at where elected Republicans in the United States, the communities they represent as compared to the communities that elected Democrats represent, elected Republicans are much more likely to represent communities that depend on oil and gas production and export. And so there's a tendency within US politics to say, I'd like to swap Russian gas for US gas, and not I'd like to find ways to help the Ukrainian economy decouple themselves from fossil fuel use. And I would submit that latter path is much more robust and long-term durable. But that's a less bipartisan path. But certainly on the national security and boxing out Russia, I think that's the place where we can enter this in a bipartisan fashion.
So much. And I have another question. I don't know how much time we have with you. I believe like 15 minutes.
Yes.
Right? Perfect. We can have more time. So I would like to see the parallel between the energy security and national security, because you kind of touched on this in your answer just now. But I would like to dig closer how US is deploying renewable solutions to protect their security, and what we as Ukraine can learn from you.
Oh, I'm not sure that I would put the U.S. as a paragon of energy security. I once described the United States as we have the energy policy of a teenage boy. We want all the freedom that adults have, but we don't want the responsibility that adults have. And if you question that, we're gonna scream and whine and kick and moan, and we might break some things in the process. I think the example of the United States is more that we are following a larger global trend, which is that the world and the United States are decarbonizing faster than our policies would allow, because at the end of the day, people like to not pay for energy. This has been a market-led decarbonization, not a policy-led decarbonization. The total oil demand in the United States today is the same as it was 15 years ago. The total coal demand in the United States is 30 or 40% of what it was 15 years ago. Natural gas is the only fossil fuel use that's rising in the United States. But even for natural gas, it's increasingly an export play in the same way that oil is increasingly an export play in the United States. And all of that's happening not because the United States decided to be poorer. It's because, given the choice, American consumers prefer not to pay for energy. If I can put a solar panel on my roof and not have to pay electric bills, that's a pretty good deal. If I can put an electric car in my driveway and not pay for gasoline, that's a pretty good deal. If I can insulate my house and not pay money to the gas utility, that's a pretty good deal. Those trends are moving much faster in a lot of other parts of the world, but they're all driven by economics. And I think that example of making sure that we don't rely exclusively on markets, but we understand that markets will push in a direction consistent with our climate goals, consistent with our national security goals if we let them. And I think what we need to be cautious about, and I don't know who's in the room, I will preface this by saying that I love the Norwegian people. Norway is a beautiful country. Norway has also built an economy with an enormous oil resource, where if you ignore scope 3, they are almost a zero carbon country. If you include scope 3, they are a really, really high carbon country. And if we are going to globally develop the kind of national security posture that doesn't depend on a handful of countries that happen to luck out and sit on fossil fuel reserves, if we are going to have an environmental policy that leaves the planet better than we found it, if we are going to have an economic policy that puts consumers first, we can't just shift from cheap energy for me and expensive exports for thee and claim that that's success. And so I think globally, trying to figure out how to make that transition that Norway has made, that the United States is making, certainly that the Chinese and the Indians are making, but and in a way that Ukraine, with all of your own decentralization efforts, are trying to get to, but do that in a way that doesn't say, well, we're going to do all this, but we're still going to consume just as much fossil fuel as a globe. We're just going to shift from consumers to exporters and pretend that we're very virtuous in the process.
Thank you so much. And I just already received some questions from our panelists. So if that would be possible, Alex, please.
Thank you, Alex Cornelll, who President of Elected Officials to Protect America, and on the International Elected Officials to Protect the Earth. I deployed all over the world with the Marine Corps, and a theme we saw everywhere was our dependence on fossil fuels was helping dictators stay in power. And so in that light, looking at the sanctions bill, looking at the ability to freeze the assets to support Ukraine, what are the realistic possibilities of something moving through Congress that essentially tighten the controls on the financing so he doesn't have that way to wage war with basically fossil fuel dictator support?
It's tough. Candidly, it's very hard, this Congress. And I go back to what I was saying about cryptocurrencies. Increasingly, that's the way to avoid these sanctions. You run the ship out, you allow somebody to pay you with cryptocurrency. You run that through Garantex, which is a big, it's essentially a piece of digital code that's run by Russia that scrambles all the cryptocurrency together and then spits out a separate token that evades the money trail that's innate to the blockchain. Those tools are increasingly widely used to evade sanctions, and we just really with this Congress, we don't have the votes to crack down on those tools. I do hope that your experience, in the Marines, in a future Secretary of Defense comes back. I remember Jim Woolsey when he was at the CIA saying we need to invest in efficiency in the military because our supply chains are our biggest vulnerability. And so for purely national security reasons, if we use less oil, we have a more robust, a more stronger fighting fleet, right? The as a fun aside, when I was a young engineer, we did some work for DARPA, the Defense Research Projects Agency, and DARPA said that, this was when the Toyota Prius was coming out, and they were saying, we're going to have a 5 kilowatt-hour battery, and that's going to be real exciting. And the guy from DARPA said, I need something that can launch gigawatt scale instantaneous pulses of projectiles and doesn't have a heat signature. And that's why I want an all electric tank. And oh, by the way, we free up our supply lines. So there's a ton of strategic reasons to do that. I think this Secretary of Defense and this White House and this Congress, my opinions of them are probably not appropriate for polite company, but they are not particularly vested in a stable global order that benefits energy consumers anywhere or that heightens our military posture. But I would hope in future Congresses we can get back to that.
Thank you so much. And finally, I would like to ask you if you have any final remarks to all of us, because you have here, I know you can't see the audience, but you have here a huge amount of state representatives from the US. And if you would want to give them some message that you would want them to know and transfer instead of you, that would be great. And of course, I would like to hear the message to all of the Ukrainians in the room, and anything that you want to leave us with.
Well, number one, thank you for all being there, for carrying on the light of COP. I think we realized the diplomatic challenges created by the United States pullout. It's not lost on any of us that, the question of how we're going to make sure that every country has NDCs that avoid the worst effects of global warming, that they meet or exceed those NDCs, that they're at sufficient level of ambition, all the things that the COPs have struggled with forever, that accomplishing that ends depends on someone with the moral authority and the economic clout to enforce the post-World War II order. That's historically been the role that the United States, incompletely and imperfectly has played. And in our absence, I just want to thank you all for being there, for continuing to carry that light forward. We will be back. You will see a lot of Americans who are down in Belém. Yes, they are not representatives of the federal government, but engage with them and recognize that they're all engaged in these issues for all the reasons that we talked about, and they do represent the majority of the American people, even if they aren't, currently in the majority of the elected officials representing the American government. And I guess I just leave you also that I'm hesitating on how to say this, because I would like the United States to be the leader of the free world that we tell ourselves we are. But leadership abhors a vacuum. And if we're not there, it's going to be important for folks of good character and good values to step into that vacuum, as difficult and as challenging as that might be, before folks of lower character and lesser values get there ahead of you. So keep up the good fight, keep up the leadership. The United States will be back, but we just ask you to keep the fires warm while we're away.
Thank you so much. We are clapping here in case you can't hear it. And we are really happy, and hopefully next year we're going to see you here in person. Always in our hearts, the moment that you actually joined us today. So now please take back your seats. Now I would like actually to give 15 seconds to every single panelist that here just to tell little about themselves, and then I'm gonna transfer to the questions. We're gonna start with Alex Kornelll, who.
Thank you, Darka, and a huge thank you to everyone at the Ukrainian Pavilion for organizing and putting this wonderful panel on. Alex Kornelll, I'm president of Elected Officials to Protect America and Elected Officials to Protect the Earth on the international side, and our partnership with the University of San Francisco and our new partnership with the British Parliamentary Education Foundation, which we were excited to announce at the British Pavilion earlier this week.
I'm super privileged to be here as a born academic and as a Ukrainian because I'm from Kharkiv, and everything that is happening is deeply personal because as an associate professor of environmental, climate, and energy law, I saw the interaction between energy transition and climate change a long time ago. And it's quite a challenge to admit that it had the war to happen, that we felt it firsthand. We Ukrainians, they are so close on the front line. My people who are there in Kharkiv, my father, who is still there in Kharkiv, fighting for the lights on, to keep the lights on and lives on, because my father is a doctor. And I'm super grateful to be here and to contribute with the perspectives of someone who could have warned that, as a BCC warned us a long time ago, and throwing the numbers that are transmitted into people's lives. And I really hope that our today's discussion in Ukraine's pavilion would inspire people all over the world, UK, US, keep on fighting. And because people in Ukraine, as Darka said in the very beginning, don't have the privilege of time.
G'day everyone. My name's Connor. I'm from Australia. I work at an organisation called the Smart Energy Council. We're a peak industry body for the renewables sector. I must say I'm very honoured to be here and with such esteemed colleagues alongside me. In terms of what I can bring to this is that Australia has gone through an energy transition and has such a distributed network, and there are so many lessons to be shared to the Ukraine situation and how we can help share that expertise. So thank you again for having me.
Hello, everybody. It's very big honor to be here with you, my friends. I am mayor of Ukrainian city on the west of Ukraine, small community, 16,000 people we have, and it's very important to think about climate actions, about energy transition, about Marshall Plan for Ukraine. But when we think globally, we must act locally on some places, on some towns, on some villages, and municipalities of Ukraine. City councils are very interested in these directions that can save our planet, our Europe, our Ukraine, and global society. So I am here to be in this direction for my Ukraine, for my community, and I am very I want to thank very big for our friends from United States of America, Australia, United Kingdom, and all global society for your support of Ukraine. Without your help, it will be very, very hard. So we very thankful you for this help and support.
And you can keep the microphone. I'm going to start with you, Oleg. We actually have been working with Oleg for some time, and we are wondering right now, since I mentioned right now is a really big time of the blackouts in Ukraine, and I'm wondering what are the requests from your community that you get as a mayor, as well as how can possibly utilize your sister city relationship with other cities abroad to deal with this or any other issues you have on the ground in your community.
Thank you, Darka, for very interesting question. It's important in all directions have friends, have colleagues, and work with communities, with towns, with countries is also the same. So, for example, when we have problems in our city with some energy directions, we don't have think from empty place. We can have some partners, we can search some partners, and this experience of partners, different partnership cities, communities is very important for us, because we can do the same as they have done, or maybe better. For example, this year I with my Ukrainian colleagues had possibility to be in United States of America, thanks all elected officials to protect America, and it was very important to see how work local governments in United States of America. And for example, we now built in Pustomety 100 kilowatts solar plants for our waste facility treatment, and we can do it with experience of another our partners, our European, for example, or American cities. And for example, we search for different grants, different funds in Europe, in global society, because all our money go to help our Ukraine, to help our defenders, and we could do something only with this help of our partners. For example, now we have won some grant for reconstruction of our water supply and wastewater infrastructure in our city, only because we have partners in Poland, in Europe, and two communities, our and Polish, realize, implement important for us projects. And it's very important to have knowledges and experiences from different partnership. For example, we have a very good organization, Covenant of Mayors East, and we can have information about very good expertise from globally level to our local projects, and we can use this the best practices to realize in our community. And it's very important not wait for win in our war, not wait for peace, but do now, because we can be on the west of Ukraine, on the center of Ukraine, good base for rebuilding of our east and our south, because we can do something in our communities and do maybe some mistakes, and with this experience it will be much more easier our friends, our front line in Kharkiv region, in Mykolaiv region, to build something the best for this community. And Marshall Plan is a very good idea to do for Ukraine, very good support. And I would like to say once more at the end of my speech, we must, as one said Alex, think globally and act locally.
And since Alex was mentioned, the microphone going to go back to you. EOPA, Alex is the president of EOPA, has mobilized thousands of elected officials across the US. And I was wondering if you could share experience that we can afterwards have also utilized in Ukraine on mobilizing elected officials in support of any issues, as well as how we can partner with, as Ukrainian cities representatives, with the US cities abroad.
Thank you. It's a really important question that goes even beyond just the Energy Security Marshall Plan, because a lot of United States elected officials get bogged down in the day-to-day issues that are happening. And unfortunately, some of them very much related to climate, like wildfires and natural disasters. And so it's extremely important to have the ability to educate the US lawmakers on why Ukraine is so vital for their security as well. And it's connected to the international security and, frankly, preventing those wildfires within the United States by tackling the climate crisis together. Because the oil and gas industry, and particularly those tied to states that are dictators, OPEC is practically all dictators, OPEC plus all but two, right? And so when we don't reduce our dependency on fossil fuels, it's going to increase the number of natural disasters and fires and floods that are happening in the United States, which has a direct effect on the local elected officials. And so the first stage for our work, making sure we educate the lawmakers we're working with, because once they hear about this, they're like, yes, absolutely, we need to do this together. And so one of the first steps after that is bringing the lawmakers together, because when they talk with members from the Ukrainian parliament and mayors from across Ukraine, they see the connections. And that's why we have a public leadership certificate program run through the University of San Francisco and a master's degree, where elected officials from the Ukraine, United Kingdom, and US and partner countries, along with businesses and NGOs and philanthropy and impact investors, come together and they form policy teams and create innovative ideas and how we can increase our energy security and protect the planet at the same time. And within that, organically, a lot of sister city partnerships form. Once they form, we then assign an elected official fellow to work with them. So for instance, Jordan Mead, who's unfortunately not with us here as a counselor in Kent in the United Kingdom, is working with Chernihiv. And then Laura Dent is from Virginia, and they have a wonderful triad pairing to see the innovative ways they're all working together to strengthen the relationships, educate each other on the importance of energy security as global security.
Thank you so much. And while we're talking about that, can I also touch with Connor on the finance and renewable energy in the subnational diplomacy of Australia? We know that Australia is really good in providing renewable energy solutions. So I'm wondering, in your organization, what was your experience with doing so?
Yeah, thank you. I'd say one point to start in terms of context is that Australia has moved from a centralized grid, a few big coal, dirty coal power plants that would go out through a transmission line and then spread into the city, and everyone was just a taker of energy. Australia's now moved to a point where Adelaide, South Australia, where fingers crossed will be here next year for COP, they have days where they've reached 115% of their power grid for the entire state from rooftop solar. And that is an extremely difficult challenge from an engineering perspective to try to figure out. And there's a few reasons as to why Australia's gotten that place. So it was a combination of some federal programs in terms of rebates towards solar panels and now batteries in Australia, but it's also really strong state programs and local councils encouraging it. The finance piece itself, there's been schemes where it's an inbuilt upfront rebate model and having that ease of consumers. I think that's probably something that's quite important when it comes to household energy, is that as much as we may care about energy, most people don't. They don't really care about energy. They just want to make sure their power bill's low and they can turn on the lights. And so if you can make it simple and convince them with the narrative, it goes a very long way. And so councils holding sessions where you invite your neighbour along and learn about, what does a household battery mean? What does it mean to put a panel on your house? Has gone a huge way. And then being able to pair that with simple rebates where it's built into the cost. So no person needs to apply for it or go through some process. It's just an upfront discount. And it'd be interesting to see how those models could be applied to Ukraine, where in Australia's context, it's built into your power bill. So all the major energy retailers have a liability there. In terms of other local areas, there's a great example called the Hepburn Wind Farm, where a community got together and led by the local council and a group of, passionate people about decarbonising their power, managed to get 3 wind turbines. They're small turbines, but there's a couple of thousand houses in the area, and they've managed to use that, and that contributes to a large amount in their distributed grid. So you don't have that reliance on the transmission and coming a long way to get there. And that's done a lot for local security. Their power bills are much lower, and they've been able to decarbonise their energy power. And one more example before I let you get back to it was we're seeing a lot of new suburb developments. So there's a bit of a housing shortage in a lot of Australian cities, and they're opening up these new parcels of land And instead of building them in through the same grid system built on the antiquated system of everything's coming from a coal power plant, they're creating a microgrid for this new suburb. And so I'd see it as a huge opportunity in Ukraine where you can have a coordinated system, almost like behind a house meter, a lot goes on. You have that for your whole suburb, and you're able to link it up to virtual power plants where you can, give and take from people's home batteries. You've then got vehicles and vehicle to grid and vehicle to everything. The possibility there is so exciting, and the size of the storage available for when a car is, only driven 5% of the time, the rest of the time it can be supporting your neighbor's power. And then also being able to coordinate your energy loads inside that grid. So you've got smart meters on each house, and you've got the ability to control when the hot water's heating up, and you time that with when the wind's blowing or the sun's shining and the free power's right there, and then that's stored energy in terms of thermal. So I think there's a lot of really exciting things that Ukraine really shouldn't be starting from square one in terms of the engineering side of things and the possibility there.
Thank you so much. And since we already discussed in all of the solutions, I'm wondering, Zhenya, you're as academic from Kharkiv, who is very much the person on the ground. Could you comment on some of the needs that Ukraine have at the moment, and how we, for instance, can match them with some of the things Connor just said about, is it possible? Is it realistic? And what we can do to bridge the gap?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. Actually, the need is when the reconstruction of Ukraine is estimated for now, after the 3 years of the full Russian-scale invasion, around 500 billion euros. And the bill is rising every single day. So I think this is the biggest challenge. And but as well, we should see it as, we should frame it in a way that Ukraine knows the cost of inaction. So we already have it. And we know that every single day, the bill will be growing. Unlike most of the countries who have the privilege of time, which I initially mentioned, they postpone calculating the price that would definitely be much more than Ukraine's reconstruction. Talking about the challenges and the situation on the ground, in 2022, Russia weaponized Ukraine's energy system, but not only Ukraine's one. It cut 50 cubic meters of gas supply to Europe, which caused the first unprecedented crisis since 1970 in Europe. And it was skyrocketing prices. So the euro felt it firsthand. Despite all these challenges, Ukraine was advancing a lot on developing policies in place, legal instruments in place. It was a very unique numbers that we were showcasing last year in Ukraine's pavilion, and it is growing that in 2024 only, by 2024, for 2 years, during 2 years of the full Russian-scale invasion, Ukraine installed 1.9 gigawatts of the renewable generation. It mostly includes the solar power panels, the household solar power panels, but as well battery storages that manage to provide the critical facilities like water supplies, hospitals, around 1,000 hospitals in Ukraine were provided with basic solar panels that could provide with enough electricity to help the operational unit running. And we have this number of projects growing, but coming back to the number which I said is not enough. So the biggest challenge is that the reconstruction is happening now, and this is what Oleg mentioned, the fantastic projects that are being led by the local communities, because we are reconstructing amid the ongoing war and amid the destruction without any fear, of the potential, risks for financing and investment in this project, but because we're doing it on our own. So again, I would be throwing you many numbers more, but I think that to conclude with this is that we need the investment coming to Ukraine now, and we need the projects that would support the action on the ground, and mobilizing the resources that can be under the UNFCCC, the access to the climate funds, because Ukraine has done its home task already. So we put a pretty ambitious NDC. We have developed and adopted the renewable energy plan that looks into the 25 gigawatts of the renewable capacity installed by 2035. And this is pretty ambitious. We have the ambitious climate law that enshrines the legally binding target by 2050, which soon will be followed with the secondary legislation that would translate it into the real actions on the ground. And what it means like for the local communities in Ukraine are developing NSCPs, it's local energy and climate plans that would ensure that all of the projects that are flowing would be aligned with the net zero, climate neutral, prioritizing renewables and grids. But as well, one of the challenges is that is of course battery storage and the grid as well. Like having all of these capacity on the ground, it's always not enough because we know as well like the challenges that we have with the human capacity and the human capital in Ukraine these days. So we definitely need more of the of international experts and international support, not only with having the money flowing, but people force. And as I noted, like in a couple of previous panels, like the green reconstruction of Ukraine is not the question. Nobody's questioning it. We have this vision strongly aligned, like with civil society, with the legislative processes that are currently happening. We are as well developing like very interesting point. We're developing the green recovery law that defines like what green recovery means for Ukraine, and it's like the legal definitions that would be later on supported by like the concrete plans with the certain targets, and it's hopefully would be adopted in 2026. But at the same time, we need more people on the ground that would be able to implement it in life.
Thank you so much, Zhenya. And actually, why I still have you here, I would really like to talk about finance with you, because what we notice is that here we collect together, we all talk about how beautiful Ukraine, energy innovation, and like how much possibility and opportunity is there. But there is always a question of money, whether it's talking about the COP, making the COP pavilion happen, whether it's making the project on the ground happen. So I would like to know, since we are at COP30 right now, there's a lot of Article 6 discussions. What is the perspective of Article 6 being able to be deployed in Ukraine and finance some of the projects at the moment?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. And it's very broad and very comprehensive and challenging like question to tackle, because a lot would depend on the political will from the country, because like Article 6 is pretty complex mechanism on the one hand, and the rule book that was adopted last COP, now it's in the process of clarification for the countries like over the world. But we do see the potential, and we have been working a lot with the Ukrainian government, and we are going to launch the brief from Oxford Net Zero on the 18th of November in this pavilion, and we have the discussion that would dive deeper into what Article 6 can mean and what carbon markets, how carbon markets can mobilize the finance for the Ukraine's reconstruction and recovery. But as well, like with this regard, like we should see Union for CCC processes at the guideline and like the lighthouse rather than the only single solution. So Article 6 is one of many that we should tackle, dive deeper and should use. It would take some time to make it workable, like to implement it. But we do see the potential. We do see this fantastic potential, taking into consideration our discussions with the UK government on having the memorandum of agreement under the Article 6. We'll see where it goes, because it's a lot of the technical like things on the background, but I think it's very much of the perspective things. And of course, we should be leveraging already existing partnerships with Switzerland and with Japan, and we have been working on adopting the actionable plans that would make it happen, because the projects are there is the interest, there is the appetite, and thanks to many interactions with the international companies like ITMO or like the others that see this potential. They were very much greeting Ukraine's updated NDC that was adopted like amid the war, and this is like as well like a very great like framework and the ground base that would enable this financing flowing into Ukraine, because it gave the clear signal for the potential investors that there is an ambition and we can use that. So there is definitely the potential, and we have been doing like the fantastic work in that. Like many people were involved from across different ministerial like task forces like to make it happen. We hope that it would be done at the nearest time.
Thank you so much. I'm also crossing the fingers out here. And now I'm going to transfer back to you, Alex. Also, question on finance. How we can utilize sister city relationship, subnational diplomacy relationship to finance projects in the countries in need?
Traditionally, you'd have the federal government be the lead on many of the finances. Unfortunately, right now, as we know in the United States, the federal government has become an oddity. And so the responsibility of showing and leading in the world has come to the subnational governments. But the wonderful thing about the United States is when we look at the top 10 states that have the most economic power, 8 out of 10 are what we call blue states. And 70% of the counties in the United States hold the economic power. And so this is where actually the money is in the United States. It doesn't represent the current federal administration. And so what can we do to find more innovative financing mechanisms that can support? Well, we found that you really can't have a project without it being insured, because without insurance, there's no financing. And so from there, we could look at, say, there's some municipalities who are interested in being able to reinsure the insurance companies in Ukraine so that they can provide that geopolitical insurance for distributed clean energy. So we're in talks with a few municipalities on that, and how that mechanism is going to be in place is still in process. But that's one avenue where a sister city relationship could directly support Ukrainian innovation and energy security.
Thank you so much, Connor. Could you also touch on like the best mechanisms of finance that Ukraine can build upon and take the experience from Australia?
Yes, it's a great question. I'd say, think about that. One mechanism in terms of financing on the household side of things is that Australia has this model for the rebate of panels and batteries, which just got announced this year. It started in July, and there's been 120,000 household batteries installed since then. And the way it works is that when you install a product, it creates a number of certificates in this market that all the energy users have to buy a certain number of certificates each year to prove that they're, purchasing or using a certain amount of their energy as renewable. And then that gets passed on to the power bills of either large industry or to households through their power bills in that process. So it's like a circular way to build in the finance through the energy system. However, like the modeling that we've done as an organization shows that there's a greater saving from the reduction in the wholesale energy price than that increase in the sort of green premium that's put as an inbuilt finance piece for these products. And there's been a few really successful subnational schemes in a couple of the states, one of them being South Australia, another being Victoria, which has Melbourne's the main city there. And these programs also help with the workforce side of it, making sure they can sort of keep a sustainable industry in that. And it's not just for panels and batteries, it's also for energy efficiency. So it's how can we make sure we're using less energy, and then ability to get off gas, which I think is a point I'd like to touch on later. In terms of the larger scale finance, there's a number of financial institutions that sit underneath our Commonwealth government. There's one called ARENA that gives grants to like new technologies coming in, and then another that provides like concessional loans, so like very good finance rates. And I think there'd be a great potential in terms of that. And if there's even if it's like a no interest loan or a negative interest loan from, you know, other national governments to Ukraine or through the state and local governments, with the knowledge that this investment really will pay off over the period.
I will transfer back to Alex.
One other aspect, I was actually chatting with a state senator from California here, and it's the fourth largest economy in the world. As a result, they have a carbon trading program that's generating a tremendous amount of revenue for the state. And he's very interested in how we can open that up to the international markets, particularly under Article 6. And so states in the East Coast, we have Reggie, which is trading at about $8, but in the West Coast, it's trading about $40. And so if you're able to open it up for outside the United States and be able to enter the rec markets within globally and work with Ukraine on a subnational level, but say between California or a coalition of states on the East Coast, then that can open up financing actually for projects within Ukraine that can actually will have a real return for those folks in the United States too. So it would be a win-win-win.
And since you already mentioned that there are some things you would like to discuss but didn't have an opportunity yet, I'm gonna go right now one by one. And if you have, some fun things you would like to mention, some topics we didn't discuss, please go forward. And afterwards, we're gonna transfer to the final key remarks from the Ukrainian government.
Yes, thank you very much, dear friends, for a very interesting discussion. It was very important to hear some news from Australia, from United States of America, from United Kingdom, and this experience is very important for Ukraine in this difficult time, and it's very important not to be alone and to have possibility, to have opportunity to now the best practices of our global world. Our motto of our city is that Pustomety is a city of opportunities. So we search for different opportunities. When we can see something that can be good for our community, it's the best for us. So for this are partners, for this are partnership, and this good experience. I think that maybe in the very, very maybe far future, we will teach Russians how it must be in local communities, in country, in law, and different directions. So you help us to do very important things in Ukraine, and in some, I don't know where it can be, we will take these knowledges to wise men, wise persons from these aggressors that are now. Because, for example, we can remember World War II, what was with Japan, United States, Europe, USSR, and how good relations are now between different countries. So we are in one global society, and only together we can have good result, and this result can be also in climate, because climate don't have any borders, and we can't do something good for climate, for adaptation to climate and to our future only alone in America, in Europe, or in different countries, because we must be united, because we must do our planet better, because we haven't inherit our planet not from our parents and grandparents. We have borrowed it from our children and grandchildren, and we must do it better and give it the better.
Thank you, Alex. Connor, to you.
I've got a couple. I'll try to keep it brief. The first one is actually that not all programs are successful, and it's really important to learn from that. And one quick example is the federal government a few years ago in Australia, probably 10, 15 years, introduced a home insulation scheme called Pink Bats. And for the Australians in the audience, you'd sort of shake your head, shiver about it. The program essentially incentivized people to put home insulation in at a really cheap cost. And it led to a huge flood of people moving into the workforce with no experience and no skills, and really dodgy insulation being put in. A number of people died in roofs, not knowing the electrical system of it. And like there were really dodgy pieces done around the country, and it had a big political impact. It led to a change of government. But I reckon it's really important to make sure these sort of stories are shared, and the learnings of how that can be taken to make sure you sort of do it in a successful way. And that comes on to another piece of workforce of like no doubt there's an energy workforce in Ukraine that needs to be rebuilt and reskilled, and then skilled with these new technologies that are coming in now. And I think that's something that you'd hope that, you know, many global allies, definitely including Australia, are able to contribute on in terms of taking experience from where the best of you know each piece has been, and bringing that in. And then the other one on carbon markets, I think being able to measure and really verify the authenticity of these carbon certificates gives it such a strong financial imperative in the global market. And as you say, if you can take it from a local scheme or a national scheme to just be internationally traded, and then how that'll interact with a European CBAM, like the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, will be really interesting. See whether like Asia moves towards the same mechanism as well, and seeing how that international trade can really be clipping the ticket on that carbon piece, which means that that's the finance that can be used to decarbonize operations in Ukraine. And the final one I want to finish on was gas. I'm from Western Australia, in Perth, and unfortunately WA has a lot of natural gas that we export, fossil gas that we export globally. But there's a funny situation where another one of the Australian states actually has a shortage of gas, because the offtake agreements are set up to be heading globally instead of into Australia. But that's created this great opportunity where businesses are moving towards alternative renewable technologies. Like we're talking industrial heat of up to 2,000-3,000 degrees coming from an electric source to be able to decarbonize, like even green iron and green steel making, which is the heaviest of the heavy for the heat application. So I think there's a lot of really interesting schemes, and the subnational diplomacy, again, it's the states that are leading on this that are making such a big difference. And I think, you know, that'd be really exciting to share. And again, thank you so much for having me here. It's been fantastic. And I look forward to keeping this conversation going.
Yeah, we're going to make you keep it going, Connor. Trust me. Zhenya, any last of your words?
I won't take long, actually. I would just remind as well, and it started like with the fantastic representatives from the US and the UK, that energy transition, we should all remember, energy transition is no longer about the climate. It's about the national security. Please keep it all in mind. And again, like what Ukraine is experiencing firsthand, this is what every single country is currently experiencing. And having all of these fantastic initiatives and like solutions on board and existing, the biggest challenge is me as a legal scholar who once said that I don't believe in law, but I do believe in people, because when we're looking into the law itself, the problem is always in the implementation. And it's kind of no more moral ability to delay this implementation. So I think if the countries start framing energy security as the national security, and I think many countries in the EU has already found that, but if it goes beyond, so if we see the expansion of the renewables in a smart way, taking the best lessons and unlearning the worst lessons, and thank you, Connor, for highlighting that. If we frame it under the security, the existential survival, we won't need that much time. And Ukraine has been doing a lot on preparing for CBAM, despite the huge like fear from businesses that it would like create quite of a challenge for them. We would definitely have to respond, because it's our EU integration path. It's our like EU membership that's like we envision to happen pretty soon. We are currently developing ETS that would enable that. The current national ETS fully aligned with the EU standards and like this fantastic work that the Ukrainian government has been doing on so many areas. So like even like with taking the approximation on the chapter 27 of the EU accession EU agreement, like we have been doing like lots of screening and lots of like reporting to the EU that was amazed and fascinated by how much Ukraine has done and has succeeded like with this contest in the context of aligning environmental legislation and climate legislation like with the European standards. So like we have been like talking and doing this like quite a while. But this always great to have more conversations going on. So yes, sum it all up. Energy security Marshall Plan, it's a lot about worldwide application. So what Ukraine is applying now and what we're calling for now, it's something that could be taken as a lesson for the countries that possibly don't still feel that urgency, because it is something that would be undermining the existential foundations of any sovereign and democratic state.
Thank you, Zhenya. Alex?
I'm truly inspired by the people of Ukraine. Nowhere else have I seen, and really anyone has seen, during wartime, being able to produce the equivalent or more than the equivalent of a nuclear power plant worth of distributed clean energy, right? Just 100 kilometers from the front lines, already built 19 wind turbines that are operating and helping the houses in the fight right now. And that's expanding out to 64 turbines, right? And then when I was in Kyiv recently, it was amazing to see so many electric vehicles everywhere. And that's backed up by, I mean, Victoria here has one right now. But 23% increase in buying electric vehicles since last year. Those numbers are backing up what we saw. And it's because the people there understand that energy security is national security, right? And then when we go beyond that, we can see how Ukraine's energy potential is unmatched in Europe. It's the third most energy potential country in Europe. And just within 10 kilometers of the existing grid, you could power Europe 3 times over. The studies vary in little bits, but the amount of energy is so vast, it can power Ukraine and support Europe at the same time. So whether it's the electric vehicles, their energy security, their innovative regenerative agriculture, bringing back the forests and protecting our people on the planet, Ukraine is a wonderful example of what is possible to see across the world at recovering after natural disasters, and also how we can prevent wars in the future by learning how to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and transfer that into an opportunity to protect Ukraine and the planet at the same time.
Couldn't agree more, actually, with all of you. I feel you repeat all of my, dreams that I have every night. And there's like energy security, global application, Article 6 needs to be employed. So I'm very happy that all of you joined me today. And now I would like to transfer, as I already spoiled, to Victoria Krieva, who is the former Deputy Minister of Economy, Agriculture and Environment, as well as the Deputy of Kyiv region. So I'm going to be translator here as well. Victoria going to be speaking in Ukrainian, and you will have an incredible possibility of listening to one of the most beautiful languages in the world. Victoria, back to you.
Дякую, Дарка. But I am ex-deputy on environmental. It's very important.
It's true. We have reformations. For those who don't know, we have a lot of reformations of the ministry. So currently the Ministry of Environment merged with Ministry of Economy, and this is the ministry that supports this pavilion. Back to you, Victoria.
Да, але сьогодні я маю змогу виступати тут як саме депутат Київської області.
So today, Victoria is representing herself as the deputy of Kyiv region.
Київська область – це перша область, яку в 22-му році російські війська захопили майже на 40% за 3 дня.
Kyiv region is one of those places where Russian forces, beginning of 2022, have occupied 40% of it in 3 days.
Це та область, через яку, як казала країна-агресори, мали захопити Київ і всю владу за 3 дні.
So it's also the oblast that Russian government is promising to take fully as well with the Kyiv city in 3 days.
Але на 3-й день все зупинилося, і вже в квітні-травні 22-го року це була перша область, яка повністю звільнилася від окупації.
But of course, on the 3rd day, they changed their mind, and Kyiv was one of the first oblasts to actually being relieved from the occupation and given the hope to Ukrainians.
І це перший регіон, де потрібно вже було під час війни, на початку війни, впроваджувати інші шляхи відбудови.
That's why we started to deploy new mechanisms of reconstruction in those areas as one of the first ones.
Ірпінь, Бородянка, Буча – це всі міста, які ви зараз бачили на всіх шпальтах міжнародних, які були зруйновані, але на сьогодні вони вже сучасні, оновлені і мають енергоефективні рішення.
At the beginning of full-scale invasion, you could have seen a lot of photos from Bucha, from Borodyanka, from Irpin. And right now, just to let you know, most of these places, if you can travel to them, they're already recovered. They look very modern. They look like anything you would probably imagine about like beautiful European city.
Але в нас зараз зовсім інший виклик, і ми боремося саме з енергетичною безпекою Київського регіону.
But of course, we started to have a new challenge, which is energy, the energy of Kyiv region.
В Києві на сьогодні проживає близько 4 мільйонів, в Київській області 2 мільйона і майже 500 000 в нас переселенці з інших областей України.
So Kyiv city has a population of 4 million people. Kyiv region has 2 million people, and about half of those we have as IDPs.
І майже 7 мільйонів людей сьогодні живуть з таким графіком. Ми 7 годин без світлу, 3 години ми зі світлом.
So almost 7 million people, we live with the graphic of not having the light 7 hours a day.
І я задам всім питання, насправді, чи важлива енергетична безпека на сьогодні? І друге питання, а як ми будемо відбудовуватися?
So I have a question to you, to the audience. Is the energy security important, and how we should proceed with the reconstruction?
Ми будемо відбудовувати старі генерації вугільні, щоб просто вижити, чи ми за допомогою наших міжнародних партнерів зможемо розвивати альтернативні джерела енергії?
So are we going to just rebuild the existing coal bombed facilities, or are we going to work with our international partners to deploy renewable energy solutions?
Тому Маршалл-план – це не тільки рішення, це наш шлях, по якому ми повинні йти за допомогою наших партнерів, друзів і всіх країн, які об'єднуються навколо нього.
Marshall Plan, Ukraine Energy Security Marshall Plan, is a plan around which we all need to collaborate. People from the UK, people from the US, people from Ukraine, and any other country that it is there.
Тому я тут хочу подякувати окремо від себе, від України, від Київської області, всім виступаючим і за вашу, насправді, дуже відкритий діалог.
Yes, and I just, as a person from Ukraine, as also a representative of the government, I would really like to thank everyone here in the audience for being here, for staying with us, and for believing in Ukraine.
Тому з нами перемога і світле, зелене майбутнє. Дякую.
So the victory is with us and the beautiful green future. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. We survived the heat and we survived everything.